Good morning and welcome to Hillhurst United Church this morning. There's a banner out front of our church that says, whoever you are, wherever you're at, join us on the journey. We recognize that some people are right here in Calgary, others around different parts of Alberta, our country, or around the world. We welcome you. You belong in this place this morning. Our first core practice at our church is hospitality. Food and drink is a way in which we represent that hospitality. If we had church open today, we would be serving you food and snacks and indeed lunch. But as a heads up, next week we'll be talking to Julie Van Rosendahl, who will help us understand how bread is made and why it's important in our faith journey. So look forward to that next week as we consider food and bread in this time of COVID. The second practice is spirituality, recognizing that not all people are religious, and with good reason. But we're all spiritual beings, and we seek to nurture our souls throughout the week. I invite you to our website and to join in to any activity that will be about that spiritual nurture. The third practice is social justice. How do we walk the talk? How do we take what we say and sing out into the world to be lived, changing and transforming the world we live in? And the fourth practice is risk. We try to take risks, but I'll be sure to tell you right now that we are not opening our church for public worship till sometime in the future, and we'll let you know in good time. We want to honor who you are, your neighbor, and the safety and health of all people. But risk is important theologically and biblically as we seek to live our values. So those are the four core practices of this community as we seek to be faithful. We also want you to know that this is an affirming faith community. For over 10 years, we have welcomed all people to this church site and to the values lived out in this community. We honor you regardless of sexual orientation, age, economic status, health, well-being. You are welcome in this place. You belong in this place. And so please know you're welcome wherever you are and in this place when we do reopen in the near future. So thank you for being with us this morning. Celebrate with one another the words, the songs, the stories as we welcome Brian McLaren, who will be with us in worship later this morning.
Each week when we come together as the Hillhurst congregation, it's important for us to acknowledge that we gather on the traditional territories of the people of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. We share this land now because of Treaty 7, and this acknowledgement is a reminder that we too are treaty people. Our ancestors made promises on our behalf generations ago, promises that we must now live up to. We know people are joining us online from outside Calgary or southern Alberta or even across the country and beyond. Wherever you live, we encourage you to recognize the traditional lands that you live on and to remember the original peoples of your area. We recognize that this land was not empty when Europeans first arrived in what Indigenous people call Turtle Island. We remember the actions of the Church on this land, both for good and for ill. We are called to find the courage now to speak the truth about these actions as we seek to create new relationships in the spirit of reconciliation. May we live with respect on this land and in peace and friendship with all our relations.
Hillhurst United Church is over 100 years old. The day that it opened, there was a sign that said, a 7-day-a-week church opens. And for over 100 years, we have provided opportunities for people to nurture their souls, to grow in their faith, to live the values of this church community. And it takes the resources that we share as a community. So I invite you, if you would like, now or later in the service or afterwards, to make it a gift to the church in our offering, which you can do online. This helps us to fulfill our ministry and mission within the city of Calgary and around the world. We also recognize that we are connected through prayer. That prayer connects us one to another, to ourselves, to our neighbor, and to our Creator. And this has been a difficult week for some people. Yet for others, there's been great good news, new beginnings, new opportunities, new epiphanies. And so we connect one to another by noting this in the chat room on the side of your screen, or saying aloud or in silence as we come to prayer. Prayer is a bit of a mystery. It isn't about getting the right words. It is about the opening of our heart. It is about descending to our soul, listening to our soul as we come together in prayer. And so we invite you to connect one to another and to the Creator through prayers. Some people come this day with difficult lives, sorrow, loss. Others come with joy and new beginning. Whoever you are, wherever you're at, we come to prayers. And so I invite you to join with me in our centering prayer. We do this aware that we are held, loved, forgiven, and set free. It's with that kind of confidence that we come today. Please join me. Spirit of life, we give thanks for this new day, for new beginnings, for new possibilities. In silence, we open our hearts. We name people and places of concern and or gratitude. We do so in trust. Be in our silent meditation.
these days, probably a lot of us are wondering, what can we do amidst all this COVID shutdown? It's hard to do things and even feel like we're contributing, even like anything matters. Well, Micah from Scripture, he gives us a hint to the answer to that. He responds to the question, what does the Lord require? He responds with a 3-part action plan: do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with our God. That sounds like a pretty good plan.
What does the Lord require of you? What does the Lord require of you? Justice, kindness, walk humbly with your God. To seek justice and love kindness and walk humbly with your God. What does the Lord require of you? 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 Justice, kindness, walk humbly with your God. To seek justice and love kindness and walk humbly with your God. What does the Lord require of you? What does the Lord require of you? Justice, kindness, walk humbly with your God.
Last November, we were pleased to have Brian McLaren here in Calgary, speaking downtown for a Friday evening, then a Saturday workshop, and then at Hillhurst on the Sunday morning. Brian is a writer, preacher, teacher. We looked at, as a congregation, his book, The Great Spiritual Migration, the 3 shifts that are happening in church land and theology and church these days. And it was part of a series called WTF, What the Faith? What do we do with these shifts that are happening? I was really pleased last week to have a conversation with Brian that we recorded and we're sharing with you now. We give thanks for his leadership, his theology, his passion for the church and for spirituality in the world. So we're quite excited to hear about eco-theology, to hear about the preparedness that he's calling us to. So I invite you to sit back and to reflect with us together as we consider where we are right now in this COVID experience and where the Spirit might be leading us in the next great shift in the church.
When you wrote the book, This Great Spiritual Migration, we spent 3 weeks looking at it in sermons and looking at the various shifts that you talked about. And the first question that comes from me is the pandemic going to accelerate or derail the great spiritual migration that you write about?
Well, as in most things, I think the answer is both. First of all, the fact that you and I are having a conversation like this and that we're having church remote tells us that levels of change that people never would have voted for and never would have accepted, they've adjusted to pretty amazingly in a matter of weeks. If you had told people that they could have church online, they would have given you 1,000 reasons why not. I know there's debates in some churches whether they can have communion online, and there's people still holding the line on that. What they don't realize is when they get back together, it will be even more dangerous to have communion in person. So, so the changes are compressed and accelerated. But I think there are other people who all of this just makes them more desperate to try to cling to a status quo that is harder and harder to cling to. And I think we should expect to see that happening as well.
Someone asked me the other day, is this pandemic, a snowstorm, which you don't know have a lot about in Florida, but a snowstorm or a season or an epic experience? What would you say to that question? How do you see this?
It's funny, just this morning I was talking with some people about an article that just appeared in the New York Times by John Meacham about the Black Death. And some people, some historians think it wasn't Martin Luther and the printing press that brought about the modern era, but it was the Black Death. That the plagues that spread through Europe in the late Middle Ages caused so much death and so much destruction, and they didn't fit in traditional theological parameters. You know, people who are biblical literalists read the Bible and think, oh, diseases happen because God is bringing a plague, or even the devil is bringing a plague. And you know, that was so deeply embedded in the way people read the Bible and in their assumptions about God. But when they actually experienced a plague, they realized this takes good people more than bad people. This is completely indiscriminate. There is no theological justification for the suffering and pain that's going on. And of course, people have already tried it. Remember with HIV, they tried to say, oh, this is, you know, God's judgment on gay people. So people try to do that sort of thing. But with a pandemic that touches almost everyone in one way or another, and everyone by touching the economy, people are going to realize, oh, a lot of our theological assumptions, the way we thought the world works, it can't take this into account. And so I think what we're going to see is, at the very core of this, a theological shift in what we believe about God and God's relationship to the universe, and I think that's going to have far-reaching effects. Now, I should also say, never underestimate people's ability to be in denial. So I'm sure a whole lot of people will just be able to swat all this away and stick with their old thinking. But I think it's going to accelerate the need for congregations like yours that don't tell people they have to check their brains in the parking lot, and that say, no, faith requires and challenges us to open our minds and face all the facts and bring all of that into account in our spiritual lives.
So with that, how will we, you know, I concur, and I sense my worry is that people are going to quickly go, let's go back to the way it was. Let's just carry on. Let's forget it. How do we hold people to account and say, no, let's sit in this?
Well, here's the thing that's different. With the bubonic plagues 500 years ago and more, and with the Spanish flu 100 years ago, and even with HIV, you know, just a generation ago, we are far more globally connected than we ever were then. We have a global economy. And if we think we're going to be able to shut down the global economy quickly without any ramifications, you know, I think we just don't realize how connected we are. So I'm sure that farmers in Alberta sell a lot of their crop to the Chinese. And so you put a quarantine line up, and, you know, and people are going to feel it, even if they don't feel they're part of the global economy. We're just farmers or whatever. No, we're part of a global economy. And so I don't think any of us can estimate where this is going to go. And I hate to sound dire, but I live south of the border, so I have to. I think we shouldn't underestimate that when things get shaky. Like, imagine if enough people are unemployed long enough and are hungry long enough that we start having food riots. You can imagine the demagogues coming in, clamping down on that. You can imagine the level of autocratic control that would come in to try to suppress that kind of unrest. It could be super far-reaching, and it could change things that we assume when we use a word like democracy. And maybe that's easier to imagine happening on my side of the border than yours, but I think we shouldn't be unrealistic. Human beings have a fear of chaos, and people are willing to put up with an awful lot of autocracy in order to protect themselves from chaos. And it's just too soon to know if we will be able to go back to the old normal, or if already the cat's out of the bag. I don't think any of us know, but if there's one word I would say is important at a time like this. It's preparedness. And preparedness means that you don't have only one fix in mind. You don't have only one plan. You need a whole set of scenarios of how we adjust to an uncertain future.
The word is the word adaptable too, to be adaptable to this.
Adaptable, agile, exactly right.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a reminder to us that plagues are huge biological events, and sometimes they're extinction events. And in a certain sense, what we are finding ourselves subject to once again is that we're part of a biosphere on planet Earth where what Charles Darwin said really turns out to be true. If you're not adaptable, you don't survive. And so adaptability, agility, flexibility, creativity, they really become deeply important. And of course, you and I, we believe that those are characteristics of spirit. Those are characteristics of true faith. But there are a lot of people, those are the last words they think of, agile, adaptable, when they think of religion, and with good reason.
Yeah, or in your book on the Galapagos, you talk about playfulness as part of that as well, too. That whole way of being in the world, of being adaptable to the world around us and playful in it is so important. I want to just go back to the Bible for a second, because a few weeks ago we explored the Apocalypse. So we interviewed a theologian from Vancouver School of Theology on the book of Revelation, and he was helping us understand the book, and about Apocalypse is about an unveiling, about looking at what is hidden and looking at ourselves and what's there. And a person from Vancouver has given me a question for you around this, wondering about in that book and the talk of the great beast and the battle there. What's your take as you see this with the 1% in the economy and how they're responding? If we're all a part of this, how do you see us responding to this in a way that brings a sense of not putting consumerism and capitalism and get the economy going as the God, but perhaps reshifting and seeing what's hidden in a new way? What's your take on the apocalyptic talk?
Yeah, well, first of all, that word, that's the perfect definition of that word. It's an unveiling. And so, even the idea in the book of Revelation with the beast, the idea is behind what looks like a benign government is actually a ravenous beast. And of course, this is the language Jesus used too when he talked about, on the surface, they seem like well manicured lawns, but underneath are dead men's bones. We're walking on a cemetery, that there are bodies hidden in this field. And so that certainly is apropos. On my side of the border, we see this where African Americans are 133%, I read yesterday in one state, more likely to die of COVID-19 than white people, and how the disease is not evenly distributed because of disparities of wealth, disparities of healthcare, and so on. And I'm sure you have parallel issues on your side of the border and in different regions. But what this says to me is that we're having an unveiling of the fissures and weaknesses and imperfections, and in fact design flaws, because a lot of these were intentionally designed, of the status quo. And the opportunity that we can seize here is that as their destabilization, and maybe in some places even kinds of collapse, and you can never say that lightly because I don't think any of us know fully what that means. But when those things happen, this is where preparedness comes in. So what we realize now is that once the ugly truth is unveiled, what are we going to do about it? And we have a chance now to say, what would a saner economy be? What would a better way of rebuilding be? Let's not just try to get back to where we were. Let's try to move forward to something better. I'll give you a quick example. We all know that fossil fuels are a problem. And in Alberta, you feel this in a special way. But one thing's for sure, the airline industries aren't coming back anytime soon. And it's possible that this COVID-19 could last for years and that we can never crowd in on airplanes like we used to be. Well, what will that mean? It'll mean the prices will go up. What will that mean? The demand will go down. The fact that we're all becoming much more comfortable communicating visually, but at a distance, like we're doing now, might mean that a whole lot of us say, why do I want to bother the risk of getting on a plane and the hassle? So we could end up with a situation where demand for fossil fuels goes down, and we could seize upon that and make that a good thing for the planet, as well as we'd have to help all the people who lose jobs and all the rest. There are going to be, new challenges there. But that's what I mean. An unveiling and a destabilization creates moments of opportunity if we're creative enough to seize them. One other quick example: how many families who've been forced to spend time around their spouses and kids that they've been spending? Of course, probably a lot of them have had big fights and it's not been pleasant. But I think for a whole lot of folks, they're going to think, what was I missing? Why would I ever want to go back to the rat race I was part of? There's been something humane about this. And so all of that could be opportunities for us to seize.
Yeah, I totally think that we're going to have to re-examine our healthcare, our education, obviously our church, our relationships, just as you say. So the hope is that, in the order, disorder, reorder, the disorder we're in, we don't quickly rush to go back, that we move forward. I've read your book, Galapagos Islands, and enjoyed it immensely. And looked again this morning at your last chapter on eco-theology.
Yes.
Can you say something about that? You might want to explain that term for folks, and then just say how you see this. I think you see it as an opportunity.
Yes. Well, I mean, one thing's for sure. Let's say it like this. In October or November of last year, we weren't guessing that this would be the pandemic. There are a lot of people who were telling us, they've been telling us for decades, someday a pandemic's going to come. I should just say, when I was a pastor in the Washington, D.C. area, I had a lot of scientists in my church, and this is where they spent their entire careers. I remember one fellow, his entire career was spent in studying bacteria and viruses that spread among birds, because the concentration of birds for chicken and all the rest is so great that if that kind of virus would happen, he knew, and scientists knew, it would spread around the world. So we knew something like this was going to come. But October and November last year, we didn't know how soon it was going to come. And we didn't realize how costly our unpreparedness was. And I think for us at this juncture, moving forward, we have to realize that we are in a lot of trouble about the environment. We're like in October or November of last year in relation to the kind of environmental cataclysm that is waiting just around the corner if we don't get prepared, and if we don't start to take what's called mitigating action, or action to help minimize the bad effects of hundreds of years of ignorance and greed that have driven us to the mess we're in. So eco-theology says, you know what? Concern for the earth doesn't start with human beings. However we understand God as creator or as the spirit in all of creation, it's not all about us. It's about all of creation. And so eco-theology makes us both rethink who God is in the light of how God is revealed through creation, and makes us rethink who we are in relation to that creation, because the way we relate to creation is inseparable from the way we relate to God. But it also changes our relations with each other, our ethical obligations in relation to each other, if we live in a planet that has real, actual environmental limits that we have to respect. Suddenly, just as going outside without a mask or going outside coughing on people has an obvious effect, well, we find out that so many things we do are also having an effect on our neighbors. And what maybe is even scarier, the people who will suffer the most from things we're doing now are our children's children, right? And the potential destruction of the world that they'll inherit is so great that it makes us say, if we could go back to November and December, knowing what we know now, or maybe even better, we could go back a year or two or 5 years. what would we do differently, be better prepared for what we're going through now.
Mm. So when you think of preparedness, I want to be cautious here. Is preparedness isn't being preparedness includes being adaptable and open and all of that, but preparedness means paying attention. Is that what you mean?
I think so. I'm glad you clarified that. I think preparedness means not sleepwalking.
Yes.
I think preparedness means not being stuck in a rut of everydayness. Some people call it normalcy syndrome. Oh, this is normal. First, this is false. What we're about to say is this is the way it's always been. Well, it's not, but we think that. This is normal. It's the way it's always been. This is the way it'll always be. Sorry, no. And that's when, and that normalcy bias, that everydayness, that complacency is what really can be destructive to us. In evolutionary terms, it's the dinosaurs before the comet hits, you know.
Yeah. How is your contemplative practice, your contemplative thinking influencing your take on this situation we're in and your personal life, etc.?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think when I look outside of myself and I see people desperate, contrasting the normal that they've lost and what they have now, and they just want to go back. They're stuck between two options. What I have now and what I had before, those are my only two options. Part of what a contemplative mind does is it makes us suspicious whenever we present ourselves with two options like that, and says, well, there might be more, and there might be more going on, and maybe I shouldn't be just in my reaction, and I should calm my anxieties that want me to fix things right away. Maybe before I get so furious, I should become curious and start to say, I wonder what's really going on. And you know, that move to curiosity is often the difference between panic and reactivity and breakthroughs into new wisdom.
Mm. I like that, furious to curious. That's a nice shift indeed. What keeps you up at night?
In a good way or a bad way?
Both.
Okay.
Bad
Well,
first.
okay. I mean, I think we're in a critically dangerous moment because I think our religious institutions have failed to teach people anything close to what Jesus meant by the gospel. And I think what they've done instead is they've taught people how to just keep surviving as drones in the status quo. You know, keep people feeling like forgiven and happy drones to keep the status quo going. I mean, in my country, I see how we did that in slavery. In both of our countries, we did it with the land theft. But we've also done it while we're destroying the earth. And while we let more and more wealth get funneled to a smaller and smaller percentage of people and leave more and more people more and more vulnerable on the margins, you realize that our religion has basically said, oh, listen, you're going to heaven when you die. Don't pay attention to that man behind the curtain. And as a result, what keeps me up at night is this sense that if religion fails, it's not like nothing happens. Oh, religion goes away. No, if religion fails, then all of these other dynamics have nothing left to challenge them. And that's, I suppose, what makes me think we need a vibrant spiritual and religious life to help us access those deeper resources and see from a wider framework, and to ask questions of ethics and beauty and value, not just questions of profit and loss. So that keeps me up at night, in, I suppose, in a negative and positive way, because I can't give up. I just think, yeah, I think a lot of religion is failing, but let's say we wrote it off as a failure. We'd have to start again tomorrow. What are we going to do? And we'd be talking about value and sacredness and vision and internal formation, and we'd have to recreate the whole thing tomorrow. So you might think that that's even what's going on, is a kind of death of old things that aren't working and resurrection of things that we can't live without.
Well, and that's what gets your heart pumping in a really good way.
It does, yeah.
That's what gets you up into
the opportunity. Pardon me?
And that's what gets you up moving into the day.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the other thing that gets me up day after day is just that, I mean, this is a beautiful world and every day is such a gift. And gosh, I don't want to, I don't know how many days I have left. So I sure want to be sure I enjoy each one and savor it and experience the gratitude and wonder and awe of all that.
Thank you. I want to thank you for your time with us back in the fall, pre-pandemic, and then the opportunity to be here in the midst of this. And I think your reminder, your invitation, your curiosity, your passion has inspired me. I know our church community and the wider community too. So I want to say thank you for that. We hope that we learn deeply and pay attention through this so that we don't go back, but that we actually step forward into whatever God is calling us to. And I give thanks.
Well, thanks. Well, can I just say, gosh, doesn't it feel like a decade ago that we were together and it was just 6 months, 7 months, and it just feels like a different epic. But I have such good memories, and I have bragged about your church to so many people since I saw you, and none of us know, what the future holds. But can I just say how I think congregations like yours are blazing a really important trail, and we need you. And thank you for your leadership and your whole team and the whole congregation. We're all in this together, and the breakthroughs and discoveries that we have in one place is one of the realities of a connected world is they can spread everywhere. And I hope that you spread. I know this might be too soon to use this metaphor, but that you spread the right kind of contagion. that there's the right kind of contagious joy and vision and creativity, because that's what you all surely have. God bless you.
What a great morning to hear from Brian McLaren, and now we're going to hear from his daughter Jody as she offers her gift of music in a few moments. But as you go, let's go with the words of Brian about preparedness, of being open to the possibility of the future, about listening to where God is calling us to as we step forward. And go knowing that you are loved, forgiven, and set free, and it is that spirit that invites us to the life we lead now. May God be with you and I, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one God, Mother of us all.